I was a kid, I remember sitting in my kindergarten class during our arts and crafts time, and our teachers came around with these sheets of paper, and on them were these super thick outlined shapes. Maybe you remember that from your childhood, but there were these crazy bold outlines, and we were supposed to cut these shapes out from paper to learn how to use our scissors. Here's me. And I remember feeling really frustrated with the activity. These shapes had these super thick black outlines that I frankly thought were really ugly. And I understood that they were supposed to be a guide, but logically I thought, okay, if they're only supposed to be a guide, then they technically don't belong, like they're not part of the design at all. And so I had this idea to cut all of the outlines off completely. I didn't want them there. I didn't think they belonged. I could tell from a young age that I was definitely creative and artistic, but at the same time, very pragmatic and logical. And the bummer is that I didn't have the skills at the time to masterfully execute my plan. So they gave this sweet little face a C plus in scissor skills for kindergarten. And what I think about as I think back to that time of my life is that I feel the same a lot of the time because being a business-minded creative really is very similar. There's this constant battle happening in my mind between my creativity and my ambition. And one is driving me to create art, and the other one is driving me to grow a business. And then, of course, there's the practice it takes to get the skill sets needed to even execute in the first place. I've been a type designer for over 4 years now, and in that time I've created over 100 fonts for sale. Some of them are good, some of them are really, really bad, and some maybe you've seen out in the wild, like some of these: Palmer Lake, Tokyo, Modena, Sydney. And I've had people around the world use my fonts for their very first logo design or creating a logo for their small business, and then to the other extreme of having massive corporations like Bath and Body Works, Facebook, Jamba Juice use my work. And it was kind of trial by fire. I've had to learn a lot through experience as I'm truthfully just now getting the education I need to learn how to do this the right way. So 4 years ago, designing type really started as this creative expression, and it rapidly developed into a business that I was excited to grow and develop. So when I look back in the few years I've been doing this, I have mostly designed type with two goals in mind, like operating from one of these or the other. To create something uniquely my style, so operating from this place of artistry, or to create something that sells, this place of ambition. And it's that duality fighting back and forth again from the time I was a little kid to now. The problem is that creating fonts for the artistry, at least in my experience, didn't always mean that I would create a product that designers wanted or needed. And on the other side, creating fonts for the purpose of selling usually meant, as I'm sure has been the case for some of us at least once, it usually meant I would kind of piggyback on the trends that were happening or what was working for other type designers. And this doesn't work, by the way. If we think about these two goals as kind of a formula, it was generally really unpredictable and didn't always work. I would design fonts for creative expression, and some would sell and some wouldn't. And then I would design fonts with the intention of like doing heavy research and knowing, okay, these things are trending. People obviously want something like this. I'm going to make that. And some would sell and some wouldn't. And I couldn't really pinpoint why the fonts that did well were doing well. It seemed very random. So what I did was I went back through my catalog and looked at all my conversion rates and data and all of that to try and figure out why these specifically were selling really well. And what I realized is that there is a third element that was missing, and it was staring me right in the face, and I couldn't see it until I looked at the data. And it's this: to create something that solves a problem. And what's beautiful about this mode of creating is it's actually, in a sense, coming from this place of generosity. You are creating a product for the benefit of other people, not just for the benefit of your own creativity or your own pocket. So when I looked back, Tokyo was a big one, Modena, Sydney, all these fonts ended up solving problems for designers, and I didn't even realize it. Like Tokyo helped designers create an offset outline display type by simply changing the font that sits on top. So you can write your text in the solid version, duplicate it, and then switch it to the offset outline font, and it'll just like, boop, move it up. And this made designers' process a lot easier, especially for people who didn't have the experience to know how to maybe move something around or create a stroke. Modena was another one that did really well. I was looking for a bold, strong, powerful, feminine font combination, especially with the script and like a wide set sans. And I couldn't find anything. Like a lot of the scripts were very cute and swirly, which is fine. And then all the other signature ones were a little bit too straight up and down and not as like handwritten as I would do it. And so I decided to make my own version and solved the problem that I needed solving. And it ended up being a problem that a lot of other people ran into as well. Same for Sydney. Sydney was one of, if not the very first font duos that included two totally different fonts, like combining a script and a sans, rather than like two similar versions of the same script. And this answered the question that would flood my inbox all the time. What font should I pair with this? So after that, duos that included two totally different fonts became a lot more popular. So really, the key takeaway that I want you to get from all of this is that these products worked because I was thinking about type design in terms of what problems I could solve rather than what trends I could set. So that's our key takeaway from this whole thing. We need to be thinking about type design in terms of what problems we can solve rather than what trends we can set. And so when we take these three ways of creating, the artistic, the ambitious, and the generous, we can kind of combine them together to make a formula that is a lot more stable and isn't quite guaranteed to work every time, but gives you a lot more clarity than just shooting in the dark. And that's this. Your unique style plus solving a problem equals, theoretically and ideally, a typeface that sells. And the unique style element is crucial. You need to solve this problem in a way that only you can. And to tell you the truth, designers can really sense the authenticity behind a product. It's why when I create fonts based on what is performing well for other designers, it doesn't really work. And the opposite is true as well. If I have a product that is performing well, usually within a couple weeks, there's maybe 5 or 6 type designers that will put something out that is very similar. And it doesn't work for them either. Designers know when something is truly your style and when it's authentic, and they would always rather go for the authentic version. So if you see a product that's climbing the ranks, don't think about how to make something similar. That is undue pressure that will lead to so much frustration and total creative burnout. And I know that from experience. Instead, ask yourself, what problem is this solving for the user? And how can you make something that solves that problem in a way that is totally unique to you? So how do we approach type design as problem solving, and where do we even look to find these problems that need to be solved? In my experience, I found that there are kind of 3 main ways to find these problems. First, pay attention to problems and frustrations that you encounter in your own work. A couple months ago, I was having trouble finding a cute font for quotes for a client that I was working with. And so I made one. And because that font solved a problem for me, it's ended up solving a problem for a lot of other people as well. Same as if you're having trouble finding a serif and a sans pairing that works pretty consistently. Make one. And if you're spending tons of time on decorative handwritten notes like I was for another client, I just made one. I made a font to help make that process a lot faster and easier for myself, which saves me time and it saves my client money if I'm charging them hourly. So taking the frustrations that you encounter in your own work, the time lags in your process, or even the things that you're looking for and you just can't find, make it. Because if you're looking for it, especially if you're doing work for another client, the odds are someone else needs it too. 2, pay attention to what you're being hired to create. When you really think about it, one paying client has to represent a large group of people with the same need. So one paying client who needs a logo might represent 100 or 1,000 people who have a similar need without the budget. And so if you're being hired to create logos, include templates or create a display type that's reflective of the kind of requests you're getting for custom work. If you're doing a lot of handwritten decorative notes or quotes for people, a lot of hand lettering, create a textured SVG font. Make that process easier for somebody else who can't afford something custom. If you are being hired to create Instagram content, maybe include some Instagram-sized quote templates or graphics with your font. Really, what the goal is in this method of finding problems is addressing the problem beneath the purchase. So if you know that someone is going to buy your font, or at least think about that, to create their logo with, maybe give them a little extra help with a template. Like, eliminate the problem beneath the purchase so that your product has exceptional value over anybody else's. And third, pay attention to the 3-star reviews and or the questions you're being asked. And I know that 3-star reviews sound random, but it's not, I promise. Really, 3-star reviews are the most honest feedback resource. You avoid people who are angry with the 1-star review, and you avoid people who are elated with a 5-star review. Most of the time, I've found that a 3-star review is generally people who say, this font is great, but, and that gives you massive insight into what problems they might be encountering, whether it's your font or someone else's, and ways that you can go in and solve those problems with either a new product or by revising one that might be your own. Questions you might get asked, like I get this in my inbox all the time. What font should I pair this with? It's how Sydney came to be. Or even, will you ever develop lowercase for this? Because I was doing a lot of just all uppercase display, like minimum functionality typefaces to start. And this is telling me, okay, people not only like the look and the style that I'm creating, but they also need the functionality that a lowercase brings, or multiple weights. Like they want something to be functional too. And I wouldn't have known that was so important if I hadn't been getting that question repeatedly. So the main point here that I want to drive home, and it's what this all is about, let's create typefaces that solve problems. And the way we do that, to recap, is we pay attention to the problems and frustrations we encounter in our own work. We pay attention to what we're being asked to create and hired to create. And we pay attention to the middle of the line 3-star reviews, and if we can't find those, the questions that we're being asked regularly. And my hope from today is to empower you and encourage you to think about type design in terms of what problems you can solve rather than what trends you can set. Thank you guys so much for being here. And if you want to continue to follow along with any of the other stuff I'm teaching or putting out, you can follow me on Instagram at jenwagner.co, or you can sign up for my email list at jenwagner.co. Thank you guys.